All right, let me get into the rankings. I got the rankings today. Let me get into the rankings and the tiers, and then we can get into more questions, all right? Let me get into the rankings and tiers. So when it comes to the quarterback position, obviously, I feel really, like the quarterbacks, we kind of know who they are at this point. We have our entrenched starters, and then we got some guys who are just like a little bit more fringe, right? So in your tier one of quarterbacks, elite tier one quarterbacks, we got Josh Allen going up against Miami. Obviously, he's owned this matchup. Historically, Josh Allen has owned this matchup. He's my number one play on the board. Number two play on the board is Anthony Richardson. I think it'll be a combination of these two as the season goes on, where I have Josh Allen, Anthony Richardson. I think moving forward, Anthony Richardson is my number two quarterback in fantasy until he proves otherwise. But Anthony Richardson going up against Green Bay, a team that's down their quarterback and Jordan Love. I think he has a phenomenal day against them. Then we got Lamar Jackson, Pat Mahomes, and Jalen Hurts as still in this tier, in this top elite tier. Lamar up against the Raiders, Pat Mahomes against the Bengals, Jalen Hurts against the Falcons on Monday Night Football. All of them should be phenomenal. And then to round out this tier, C.J. Stroud against the Bears, Jaden Daniels against the Giants, Kyler Murray against the Rams, Dak Prescott against the Saints. So all of these guys are elite to me and have 20-point potential. I talked about that. The elite tier has 20-point potential any given week and a very high floor. So whether it's the rushing, whether it's the passing touchdowns, whatever it is, all of those guys have elite tier for me. So Dak could be even a tough matchup against New Orleans. I still put him in this tier because of the Marshawn Lattimore injury. Now, when it comes to Jaden Daniels, they've asked him to run a little bit less. So I don't really have any concerns, but I did tier him down. I would have put him a little bit higher in this tier, but for me, Jaden Daniels is tiered down just a little bit. And then C.J. Stroud should have a phenomenal game against his Bears defense on Sunday Night Football at home. All right, so that's the elite tier, tier one. That's the tier one. Tier two for quarterbacks. We got Tua up against Buffalo, Matthew Stafford, Baker Mayfield, Jared Goff, right? So we got Stafford up against Arizona, which projects to be a pretty high-scoring game. He's a QB1 for me this week. He's a top 12 quarterback for me this week. Baker Mayfield, another high-scoring matchup against Detroit this week. So he is also on the board for having a pretty strong day, especially after what he did to that Commanders defense last week. We got Jared Goff, Brock Purdy, Trevor Lawrence. All these are like, they're kind of questionable plays. I think Jared Goff should play well in that same matchup against Baker. Brock Purdy didn't have a lot of touchdowns last week. And it's Minnesota defense showed up against Daniel Jones. We got to see if this is the real Minnesota defense. Obviously, made a couple changes. You get Stephon Gilmore there. Or if they're still going to be, one of the bottom defenses, which I kind of think it'll trend that way as the season goes on. And then Trevor Lawrence up against Cleveland, who's one of the best defenses in the league. And then we got Joe Burrow, Kirk Cousins, and Geno Smith rounding out this tier. They all had their own individual battles or struggles, except for Geno, just a tougher matchup against New England, which this defense looks like it might improve. So Joe Burrow up against KC, we got to see what he looks like this week, especially if T. Higgins doesn't play. And then Kirk Cousins on Monday night. He didn't look too good against Pittsburgh last week. Let's see if he can make some changes this week heading into their matchup against Philly. All right, and then for your superflex options at third quarterback, Sam Darnold, Justin Fields kind of head this third tier for me. Derek Carr is also in here going up against a tough Dallas defense. You got Justin Herbert against Carolina, Caleb against Houston, and then Aaron Rodgers against Tennessee. And I've talked about how I don't like those matchups. Herbert, even though Derek Carr went off against Carolina last week, Justin Herbert doesn't have the same receiving core. So we'll find out a lot about Justin Herbert if he's going to be a mid-tier QB2 or if he's going to be a back in QB2 the rest of the year because of the receiving core and they just pound the run game. So Justin Herbert, Caleb Williams, who struggled massively. I think this will be a higher scoring game for him in Houston, but I got to see what he looks like. Got to see what Caleb looks. He looked terrible last week, and this offensive line did him no favors. And as far as Aaron Rodgers, tough matchup against Tennessee. I know Garrett Wilson's going to have a lot of L'Jarius Sneed on him, so got to see Aaron Rodgers look healthy, look good. But for now, he's in his third tier. And then benchable or desperation starts with Daniel Jones against the Commanders, Will Levis against the Jets, Deshaun Watson against the Jacksonville Jaguars, Gardner Minshew against the Ravens, Brissett against Seattle, Bryce Young against the Chargers, and Bo Nix against the Steelers. Those are the desperation plays. I don't really love any of them, but I get it if you got to play them. I get it. Any questions on the quarterbacks? That does it for the quarterbacks. We're going to move into the running backs here in a second. Questions on quarterback starts. Burrow or Geno? Yeah, I'm going Geno over Burrow. I feel like I have them in the same tier, right? Burrow and Geno. I like Geno a little bit. I think Geno's a little bit. The matchup is worse, but I just don't know if I trust Burrow, man. I think you've got to start Burrow. Let me be. I think you've got to start Burrow, but in a competitive league, I don't mind starting Geno. But I think you've got to start Burrow. You got to. You got to. Dak or Tua? Dak or Tua? Dak or Tua? Where did my shit just go, bro? Dak or Tua? I think I got Dak way ahead of Tua. Tua's in the next tier for me. Tua's in the next tier. What the fuck did I just do with my shit? Yeah, Dak was in that first tier, if I remember correctly, against New Orleans. Or Kirk Cousins? No, not Kirk yet. Let's see Kirk. Let's see Kirk before we put him as a complete start over those guys. I want to see Kirk first. Got to see Kirk. Could you say tier 1 again? Yeah, I'll say tier 1 again. Give me a second. Daniels or Tua? Give me Jaden Daniels. So tier 1 was Josh Allen, Anthony Richardson, Lamar Jackson, Pat Mahomes, Jalen Hurts, CJ Stroud, Jaden Daniels, Kyler Murray, and Dak Prescott to round it out. Dak Prescott was the last one. Dak Prescott was. Hey, Justin, can I play Fields over Darnold this week? Yeah, he has more upside. Darnold is just a safer play. So that's why, and I know they're a tier, like they're the same tier, and I might have said his name first, but that's what the tier is for. Some of them have higher floors. Some of them have higher ceilings, but the tier is the balance. The tier is the balance for me. So, for example, I have Dak Prescott in the same tier as Jaden Daniels. Now, I think Jaden Daniels has way more potential than Dak, but Dak has probably a much safer floor than Daniels and similar upside if he could throw 3-4 touchdowns, right? So he's in that tier to me because I think he's a 20-point play this week, 250 to 300 yards passing, 2 touchdown type play. Like I have Dak in that tier. That's the ceiling for me. And if Jaden Daniels doesn't run as much, if he doesn't get those 2 rushing touchdowns, we might be talking about a different player if this coaching staff is asking him to do different things. Same thing when it comes to Fields and Darnold, right? I think Darnold's just a safer 225, 1 to 2 touchdown type play. Justin Fields will use his legs. He's a safe floor play when it comes to like 50, 70 yards rushing, probably going to be somewhere in there. His ceiling is massively higher than Sam Darnold's, but he's also a riskier play in case he just doesn't perform, right? So that's why I got Fields and Darnold right next to each other. I think Darnold's will be fine against the Niners, though. Kyler Murray or Jaden Daniels? I got Jaden Daniels right ahead of Kyler Murray, but similar spot to me. Play either. All right, let me get to a couple of these super chats real quick, and then I'm going to go to running backs. Trade Devontae Adams and Achane for CMC. I have the depth. Tay and Achane for CMC. I don't think that's a move you need to make right now, bro. Just we don't know how long CMC's out for. He's not going on IR, but like this is a trade you might be able to get done when CMC's healthy. Devontae Adams and Devon Achane for CMC, you might be able to do that in PPR leagues when he's healthy. Even if you have the depth, I don't know if this is a great move, especially we don't know if like there's going to be a re-aggravation. It's not just the Achilles. That's the additional injury. It's also the calf. So you have the calf and the Achilles. Both of those have to get healthy. We got to see him on the field. We don't know how limited he's going to be for how long. I think, I don't know. I think this is fair value for CMC. Maybe you'd have to pay a little bit more if he was healthy, but for the type of injury he has, I don't know, bro. I'd probably stick with what I have. Did someone did Amon-Ra for London, Odunze, and Dynasty? Is that collusion? It's not collusion. Why would you call that collusion? Who is it collusion for? Who is that collusion for? Tell me. In Dynasty, what would the collusion be, right? Amon-Ra St. Brown is in the prime, in the peak. So I'm assuming the winning team got the team that's a threat for the championship got St. Brown. And I'm assuming the team that's probably in a rebuild or maybe contending for playoffs took the upside with Drake London and the upside with Rome Odunze. So I can't even tell which side is the bad side here. Which side's the bad side, right? Drake London has potential to be a high-end wide receiver 2 any given week. Amon-Ra is a rock-solid RB wide receiver 1. And Odunze projects to be a high upside wide receiver 2, back-end wide receiver 1 in a year or two, right? Who's the straight bad for? Tell me. Are you thinking the London Odunze side? Because I prefer, if I was a win-now team, give me the St. Brown side.